The next stanza of our program is for our journalists to pay tribute to their former colleague. Now, journalists, just give us a sound bite. You understand what that is, because we are under extreme time pressure. First, to the podium, I'm going to invite friend and colleague, Snoki Zigalala. Please give him a round of applause.
Bishop Mpumlana, President of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, President Mbeki, and fellow mourners. Our deepest condolences to the family of Dr Peter Magubane, and as veterans of the League, of the ANC League, we're honored to be given this opportunity to reflect on the life and legend of a fearless photographer whose pictures told 1,000 horrific pictures and stories about the brutality of the pernicious apartheid system and mobilized South Africans and international society to support the struggle against apartheid. But Peter was prepared to risk his life to take quality pictures of the atrocious apartheid living and working conditions of black majority in South Africa. His pictures expose apartheid, police and army brutality against South African activists who were protesting against the apartheid suppressive laws, which discriminated against the majority in their own country. Bra Peter's pictures and those of Comrade Sen Nzima convinced the international community not to invest in but to boycott and isolate the racist regime. As a result, South African goods were boycotted. For example, in Australia and Scandinavian countries, workers refused to load and offload ships that carried goods destined for South Africa. I will quickly cut my speech and go to why am I talking about Bra Peter passionately. I met Bra Peter in 1967 at Comrade Winnie Mandela's house, but had no direct contact with him as he was involved in another underground structure of the African National Congress. Comrade Winnie told us that he was responsible for taking pictures of a family, of apartheid brutality and army violence against South Africans. His pictures were forwarded to the International Defence and Aid Fund for South Africa and the ANC, and assisted in mobilizing the international community to support the struggle against apartheid. As young people, we were, however, not intimidated, but wanted to know more about our leaders and challenge the apartheid laws, which denied South Africans of quality of education and freedom in their country. We were very restless, we told Comrade Winnie Mandela, and brave and committed to reviving the banned African National Congress structures. As young people, we did many things. We prepared underground hiding places for trained cadres of Mkhonto Wesizwe, who were to be infiltrated into the country from Zimbabwe or Botswana. We were also ready to be trained by them. We distributed ANC leaflets which were sent from London using underground networks in the country. These pamphlets call for mass demonstrations and the defiance of apartheid policies and guided society on how to revive underground structures of the ANC. Together with Winnie, we mobilized youth in Soweto. That youth received political education on the history of the ANC from Comrade Joyce Kakane, Samson Doe, and others. Using Comrade Winnie Mandela's networks, we managed to establish a well-coordinated networks of committed comrades throughout the country and revive the ANC underground structures. However, in May 1969, police who have infiltrated our networks arrested more than 100 underground members of the ANC, who were detained, tortured, and incarcerated in solitary confinement for more than 400 days. 21 of us, including Winnie Mandela, Samson Doe, Joyce Kakane, Peter Magubane, and others were charged under Communism Act. We were on trial for 3 months and were later released as there was no evidence that we were furthering the aims and objectives of communism. On our release, we were immediately arrested and detained for 6 months in solitary confinement again, and 21 of us were charged again under Terrorism Act. At the end of the trial, 19 of us were found not guilty. Only Comrade Benjamin Ramotse, who was abducted in Botswana, was on trial with us, was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. However, on our release, we were all banned under Communism Act. However, Dr Peter Magubane continued to take pictures. We kept in touch with each other and he used to visit me at my home in Diepkloof with his daughter Figile, who is now ambassador, and I would do the same. Dr Peter was a man of few words, but a committed anti-apartheid cadre of the movement who was determined to expose through his lenses the apartheid brutality. His pictures during the 1976 Soweto uprising mobilized the world community to condemn the apartheid government. Dr. Peter, your selfless sacrifices were not in vain. As veterans of the ANC, we will definitely renew our organization, the African National Congress. We are determined to cleanse the ANC of unscrupulous individuals who are undermining our values, principles, and traditions. As veterans of the movement, we are actively participating in all structures of the ANC and will definitely bring back society's trust in our movement. We will not disappoint you, Brother Peter. We assure you that we'll definitely bring back the integrity of society, of the ANC in society. Lalango Kolo, Brother Peter Magubane, Robalaka Khotso, Brother Peter, Hambagahle, Sojalum Konta. Thank you.
Thank you, Snooky. We picked up a couple of sound bites there. Well done. Another round of applause to Snooky. I now invite to the podium a veteran journalist who worked with Peter Magubane at the Rand Daily Mail and Drum magazine, Mr. Joe Tolwe.
Baradisi, Remolefe, Lere, Mutofa Putin. Bala Palakwa Magubane. Thank you for giving me a chance to come and say goodbye to my brother, ke nkgonne, ke colleague, He started working for drum in 1954, making his way up the ranks at drum. And I joined the media industry in 1961. So it's just about a few years my senior throughout. As you can see, he was completely gray. I am also trying to gray my hair. I've heard the tributes to Pedro from the time that his death was announced on New Year's Day. I've read the media, both social as well as commercial, and I know to what extent he is respected. I will not bore you with adding on to that list. Bella Radisi, Borramo Baradisi, I believe that the celebration will not be complete until we allow Pedro's voice to be heard today, talking about his craft, his photography, and his skills. In an essay to the market Photoshop, it was in August 2022, he says, I learned a great deal from Bob Gosane. Just by following him around. Bob was a brilliant photographer and a real mentor to me in the early stages of my career. We used to call Bob the Ariel. Bob was a very tall man, very thin, and he used to carry one camera which he hung over his shoulder, and it seemed to weigh him down. So he was our typical Ariel. He was a master of, where are the photographers, of natural light. But not only did Magubane sing praises to Peter, he says, I'm also glad to see that the wonderful contributions to South African photography made by people like Ernest Cole, Santu Mofokeng, Rashid Lombard, George Hallen, Alf Kumalo, and his brother is sitting right here, Moffat Zungu, Mike Mzelene, Omar Pacha, Judah Ngwenya, Robert Magwaza Chabalala, Walter Pizzo, Simon Zema, Cedric Nunn. He's naming only a few of the people he could remember at the point. But in the tone of this essay, you don't get the normal attempt to pull down other people. He is building and talking about what other people have contributed. That was Peter Magubane, always generous, always trying to build rather than pull down. If there's one message we carry from him here as journalists, it's that we need to work as a team. One might succeed better than the other, but ultimately we need to hold hands. For that, I wish to thank Peter for his great contribution to our craft. The irony for me is that on March 21, 1960, he was one of the first people to come to the Orlando police station and cover the PAC's anti-pass campaign. I saw him for the first time that time when I was 17. That afternoon, he left and rushed to Sharpeville to go and do some more work in Sharpeville. We will never forget him because of his generosity, because of his openness, because of his caring. And that is what I see from this essay that I quoted from. But Magubane re lebogile ga le radimile ene dijara tse kana-kana. May a power greater than us give you comfort in these days, and ultimately that power is going to heal you. Thank you for your generosity in allowing Magubane to work for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, internationally renowned actor, producer and director, Mr. John Carney, Order of the British Empire.
Your Excellency, my President, Cyril Ramaphosa, my President, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, Premier Lesotho Nasispan, to the Magubane family, through you, Fikile, we just share the friendship and the love. Normally, as artists, we never introduce our fellow artists to our families. They only know us. So when something happens, another comrade, another artist falls, the family doesn't know who we are, nor do we know who the family is. This reminds me, I had a problem with my Wi-Fi, Mr. President. It keeps coming in and out. And Telkom keeps telling me they can't put fiber there. So I then called Telkom. And in the conversation, the lady asked, "What is your ID number, sir?" And I said, 430830. Says, no, I'm asking for the ID, not the telephone number. So, thinking of Bra Peter, if he were to answer the same question, he would say his ID is 320118. And I could hear the lady say, "No, sir, I'm not asking for your fax number." It is such a wonderful thing to be here and pay tribute to a great gentleman I met in 1972. And we talked about his pictures and everything. He had this creative spirit. When he describes the photograph, he almost relives the moment when he took that photograph. He would not explain it as, no, I was passing through and then I took this photograph. He has this preamble, which you must be patient because it could be much longer sometimes, to get to the point of telling you where the picture was taken. To all the photographers in the house, you may not know how you have kept us alive. I remember when I was arrested in Butterworth for putting on a play. And as the cops were dragging me, I saw a flash. And I got in the car and they drove to Mthatha, where we were charged under communism, furthering the aims of communism. I said, I did a play, for crying out loud. But then while I was in my cell on the 20th day, a piece of paper from the Daily Dispatch with the photograph, them dragging me. That was the first time I fell asleep. Because that photograph meant they could not kill me. Because the world knows they had. That was the job done by Peter Magubane. In the midst of stones and dustbins and bullets flying and tear gas, he wanted to photograph those that were grabbed by the police. And the police did not fear so much our stones and petrol bombs. They feared that camera, because that camera exposed the brutality, and it was a record that they have that young man. Now they have to release him somehow. I was thinking the other day, Zizi, that if Peter was still Ubra Peter, we have to put the prefix Ngamaxhosa. Ubra Peter, we could have deployed him to Gaza. And we would have had better pictures. Not better in the sense of better, but in the more desperate way. I'm here standing for the Living Legends Legacy Trust, which was set up a couple of years ago. Minister Zizi Kodwa and I are working very hard to resuscitate and restructure the living legends. Most of us who are over 70 worked during the time where we were not paid. That's why we are poor in 2023. Lord Snowdon, the greatest photographer in England, these were millionaires in pounds. But Peter Magubane took his photographs with his own little spool and then processed them and handed them over, and was not paid for those photographs. Because the man of his stature and his history and achievement should be a millionaire in US dollars. This is because that is the time we operated. That's why Minister Zizi and I and some few friends want to create this wonderful structure that would look after our legends. In 1994, when we got our democracy, I miss our freedom. The structures were honored. The business people were put that side. There's people who were in the MK were also honored. There was the Veterans League that post the war, they would be looked after by a small stipend that allows them at least to be able to buy an aspirin when they have a headache. We in the cultural structures we fought, we gave up, and yet we now die as paupers. And we need the minister to do something about it. So what we are working for with the minister is to find some structure that is somehow quite close, Mr. President, to the veterans of the MK, because we are the veterans of the cultural struggle. And this structure will make sure those that are qualifying, that's leaving to you for that definition, Mr. Minister, qualify to be the people we know their legacy, their footprints. They will at least be looked after in the sunset of their days, where they will be able to say, "Angizuya kwa sasa, I have my veterans' pension or contribution to look after my family." That is within the writers, the musicians, the photographers, the journalists, all in the arts constituency, especially who worked during apartheid. I once said to President Mandela, I have a 10 million invoice of the work I couldn't do because I rejected the work, because I was in line with the policy of the African National Congress. So someone owes me. So before anything happens, I don't know who to give the invoice to. Should I give it to de Klerk? Because now he's going to say to me, no, I'm no longer the president. And then I said, should I give it to you, Babu Mandela? He says, I wasn't the president when you were exploited. So I don't want to be in these two ways. So we are going to come, Mr. President. I think we should have the veterans of the cultural struggle, which I love when Minister Naledi Pandor calls it cultural diplomacy. And that is going to give us an opportunity to honor the likes of Dr Peter Magubane. The likes that are sitting there. I mean, it's very rare at my age that there are people much older than me who are sitting there, those journalists and those old ladies there. So we need to look after them. They cannot depend on SASA and the 350. We owe them more. It's very easy. You've done it already. You recognize the MK veterans. So it's not something new. There's a formula for it. So all we want are the veterans of the cultural struggle. Lindy, thank you. And the family. I'm moved by you honoring your brother and his wife. In our families, we never somehow understand that Mrs. Kani is actually more important than Dr. Khan. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a family. They continue that legacy. And thank you to Auntie, to Matthew, and to come at your age to be able to come tonight. To you, my brother and great honored friend, Bishop Mbumlwana, and the clergy behind me, thank you for availing yourselves at any given time to come and bless our occasions. Thank you very much. I still remember we were burying someone in Port Elizabeth, and so we thought, we need people with that code 15, Abashumayeli, who could bury bana license yongwa. With all our comradeship and our degrees, we can't know about this person because we don't have the real license. So you're availing your mfundisi nonke. Always come at a time when we need you basically to help us in Wabama comrades. In all, thank you to the children, the grandchildren, and thank you for the life of Peter Magubane. Thank you.
Siyabulela Bra John. Xa usiya ku-president ungathi the money you are owed. uyibeke in economic terms, uthi the opportunity cost. Izawuvakala kakuhle. The opportunity cost is the foregone option. You didn't do it because of the struggle. Bazawuva kwa treasury. Xa usitsho njalo. Ndlovu, please help me. Veteran journalist, also in those structures of the time, intergenerational, Mr. Movango.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Program Director. Ngizoqala ngokubingelela owayumongameli wezwe ubaba uThabo Mbeki nomama uZanele Mbeki. Ngibingelele umongameli wethu ubaba uCyril Ramaphosa. Ngibingelele undunankulu wesifundazwe eGauteng ubaba uPanyaza Lesufi. Ngibingelele uminister walezi esiphansi kwazo thina lezi zokujiva uminister uZizi kodwa. Ngibingelele umndeni wakwaMagubane wonkana ngokuhlonipha okukhulu bese ngibingelela abahlonishwa neziphakanyiswa ngegama elihloniphekile elithi all protocol observed. Dr Peter Magubane was perhaps the most celebrated photojournalist that this country has ever known because he set himself apart from the rest of us with his hard-hitting revolutionary posture and bravery. This was at a time when the regime was brutal and would not think twice to act against activists. Dr. Magubane distinguished himself by going to those places that other people feared to go. His photographs constantly showed the harassment of black people and the brutality of the regime of the day. And for that, he was constantly harassed and arrested by the government. He was arrested numerous times and spent more than 2 years in solitary confinement. He suffered the infamous 5-year banning order. It was after the expiration of that banning order in 1975 when I met Dr. Magubane for the first time. Of course, he was already a legend that time, but it was in July of 1976 when Kabu Tukwana, Nkosini Nkosi, and myself were arrested and detained under Section 10 of the Internal Security Act and sent to Modabi prison, where we would spend the rest of the year that my relationship with Dr. Magubane became stronger. As we walked into one of the cells, we stumbled upon most of the country's leadership inside that tiny cell. And there was some form of relief that at the very least we were going to be incarcerated with familiar company. We were busy trying to find places to patch ourselves when Brapita, we called him Pedro Gonzalez those days, called me and asked me to plant my worldly possessions, sleeping mat and blanket right next to him. I was then to sleep between him and Joe Tlolwe. Talk about being surrounded by giants. Now, let me first explain that I was shit scared of Brapita those days, before the Modabi excursion. That was because I had become very close friends with Zinzi Mandela, Zenani Mandela, and Fikile Magubane, who were inseparable and were students outside the country, Swaziland, Botswana. I used to visit them in Swaziland and Botswana occasionally, and whenever they were back in the country, we would hang out and go out to the movies and other places usually visited by young people those days. Now, you don't want the father of one of your female friends to call you and ask you to sleep next to him for the next forever in prison. One of the scariest things about our detention, about Section 10 of the Internal Security Act, was that there was no end date. We did not know how long we would stay in prison. We were not charged, we were not being investigated, we were just being kept in custody because we were so-called a danger to society. So none of us knew how long we would be kept in custody. After my initial apprehension and silent prayer, Brapita and I would begin a relationship where I was schooled and educated in the underground politics of the African National Congress. I would also undergo intensive classes on how to behave as a revolutionary and an activist. And on my other side, Brajo would also put in sideways his lessons and lectures about the struggle in general and the Africanist movement. So I was surrounded this side, and it was fun. I was young, I was 21. One of my first lessons from Dr Peter was when he insisted that I should not engage in the constant debates and discussions that were the order of the day in prison. Melaiti, you don't know who's working for the system among all these people, he would say to me. As ridiculous as that sounded, it was possible some of the detainees were planted by the security branch to spy on the detainees. Dr Peter was not requesting me, he was instructing me, so I took the orders. During our stay at Moda B, some of the detainees had a lot of things to say, but I'll just recount one incident. Ambassador Fikile, I know you had said that you want us to share anecdotes, but not after the stories you told me. I'm not going to share most of the anecdotes. Maybe some of Dr Peter's children took after him. One day in 1976 in August, when a bunch of students were brought into Moda B, we, the detainees, were locked into a small field where we used to play soccer with about 20 or 30 soldiers who had come in to torture the students. Kosini Nkosi happened to kick a ball and it hit one of the soldiers in the face. And all those soldiers then charged at all of us, and we ran and were stuck at a wall, and there was about to be a bloodbath when Dr Peter went to the soldiers and said to them, "You dare touch him." It was only then that all of us, they were like, yeah, aspalandeni. What followed after that was the soldiers being cornered when it was the reverse, all because of Dr Peter. And after that day, everybody respected him like nobody's business. Throughout his life, Dr Peter did not know when his responsibilities as a photographer ended and his revolutionary life began. The two were an intrinsic partnering that always put him within an inch of catastrophe, and he did not seem to care. He would quickly put his camera aside and charge like a bull at someone, a member of the regime, to protect and defend his people. He was a revolutionary through and through, and he understood his mandate and assignment. He was one of the country's best photographers, if not the best, but he was also a consummate freedom fighter. The freedom of his people was the utmost dream in his mind, and he always saw taking pictures as part of his revolutionary contribution. Upon our release from Moda B, I got to know the side of Dr Peter that most people did not get to see, the underground ANC operative. I became one of the people in one of the many cells of the ANC and was involved in a number of underground activities. He always saw his camera become one, his camera and his eye became one of the thorns in the side of the apartheid government. We used to quip and say that Dr Peter has got the third eye because he always saw pictures that other people didn't see. He always captured things that you were there, you had a camera, but you did not see. We have lost a giant. South Africa has lost a true son of the soil. A patriot has taken his last breath, and the country has to acknowledge. We can only pray that God and his forefathers accept his soul and continue the tradition that had been started this side of life, and give him all the awards and acknowledgement and accolades that they can give him beyond the grave. Because if anyone deserves to be propped up and celebrated, Dr. Magubane is definitely in the top list. I have no doubt that as we gather here to bid his soul rest in peace, there's a celebration in the world beyond, and he's being welcomed to the land of those who will no longer suffer and no longer have to struggle just to be treated as normal human beings. Lala ngoxolo nkomose, lala ngoxolo tibantu, lala ngoxolo jiane, uyibekile induku ebandla, umndeni wakwa Magubane ududuzeke, siyabulela.
Thank you, Duma. Thank you very much indeed. I am left with one item, then Minister Zizikotwa takes over. Duma, you were incarcerated with some famous people, but Brajon, when you go to the treasury, when I got to Moda B, after Oduma, my cellmate was the Minister of Finance. I kid you not. So you come with me. He was my cellmate. And by way of introduction, I will remind him how I used to give him my extra slice of bread at Modderby. My last item is Spiwe Mhlambi. Spiwe, a young photographer that was nurtured by Bra Pedro. Spiwe, wrap it up in just a minute. And will the photographers please come and join him to perform your ritual? And from me, I'm now bowing out of stage. Thank you very much indeed. You have been a very good audience. We have not been able to manage our time, but we got there nevertheless. So thank you. Spiwe, over to you.
Good afternoon. And I'm not sure, can I just invite all the landsmen just to be around the coffin so that we can just, anyone who was around, please? Okay, I'd like to just give a small synopsis on how I met Ubaba Magubane as the guys are coming through. I met Ubaba Magubane in 1990. Yeah, okay. Are we still moving? Okay, right in front of the coffin. Right in front of the coffin. Repeat. Okay. Okay, as I mentioned when I was at the memorial service, I grew up in Soweto. I grew up in Rockville. I was a street kid. I used to sell coal. I used to sell firewood. In an aspect that I did not have a future. My world did not exist. I was left in a place that was not my biological family when my father was in prison, and grew up without both parents, and therefore I became just a regular child in a township doing all sorts of things. And I also hadn't started school until I was about 13 years old. During the time when I started school, I was given a camera by a person that I can call a messiah. It's a lady called Ujabila Pukela. She's still around. She wanted to adopt me, but she did not have means because her family was full. But all she did was like, have this camera, see what you can do with it. I could not read or write, so I couldn't even operate the camera. It took me about 2 years just to understand how the camera works. Eventually, when I got hold of it, everything changed. I just became the master of that little piece of steel because it changed. It gave me all the hope that I was looking for as a person. I carried on taking pictures on events, in my community, at school and all of that. And then people started telling me that you take beautiful images, you should sell them to newspapers because they portray the community as you see it. Well, I was reluctant in doing that, but eventually I used to frequent Jabulani Amphitheatre where there used to be rallies, mass funerals, concerts. PJ Powers used to perform there, Steve Kekana, Harare, Korimuraba, all of those. Now, this one particular day, it was not a festival. It was a mass funeral. Few comrades had been killed, and there was a funeral for all of that. They were all lined up in there. So, me being me, I only had just one spool of film that I saved for, and a standard lens camera, which is a 50mm lens, but not much. So I took my chances. I went to Jabulani Amphitheatre. Then I ran out of that film as I was taking pictures. I got a bit desperate, and I looked around, and there was a big crew of international and local journalists that were working there. And I thought, I can't approach these people. They look too powerful. They look too, I did not have that confidence, and my dialogue was not that good that I could communicate with a person and then tell them what I want. But then there was amongst them a person that was almost approachable. When you look at the person, you look like, you can talk to me. and I approached that person. That person was Dr. Peter Magubane. I told him what my name was, and I begged asked him for a film. And then he started asking me a whole lot of questions. He asked me, who are you? What are you doing here? And I said, no, I'm a photographer. I like to do this work. I see what people do. And he says, okay, I'll give you a film, but we need to talk first. So he put me aside. He gave me the biggest lecture, a master class of how to become what I am today as I'm standing in front of you. He took me through. He said, I will give you a film, but I want you to take that film and promise me something. Go work, do whatever you have to do, bring it back to me, let me critique it. And then from there, you will see how we develop. I did exactly that. I brought a contact sheet, and then he circled certain images. I said, okay, go print those. On that day, and I remember there were people like Milton Nkosi, spokesman is right here, Bujuta Ngwenya, and all of those. We just became that team, took me amongst myself and put me with those guys and said, wherever they go, you follow them. If you see them jump into cars, jump into car as well. And then if you get lost, we'll bring you back or you'll find yourself back home. So I did that. And all I want to say right now is that thank you for the opportunity that Peter Magubane gave me. I was asking for a film. He did not give me his film. He gave me time. Time that I did not, He listened to me. He listened to my cry. And somehow, when I was listening to the tribute today, it's only making sense now why he did what he did. He's tracking back from Bob Kosani, Yagan Shagabek, who put him through stages up to the way he is today, the way we celebrate him. And somehow it almost looked like it was just a repeat of history. But now he was doing exactly what happened to him into somebody else. I don't want to use the word, I got successful. I worked in almost every newsroom. Most of these people are my colleagues. I have my work all over the world. I have documented some of you sitting here. And I am proud that I was given that opportunity to make that difference in a person. Honestly, truly speaking, there was no life for me before Peter Magubane came across. So what I'm doing now is like I'm doing back. So we would love to pay a tribute in a way that we know. One of our own, a soldier, we are his army. So guys, if you put your camera on high shutter speed, put it on manual focus, and then on my count we shoot. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Thank you very much, Sabo.